What are the typical problems with the late model Mercedes-Benz C-Class, the W205, which runs from 2015 to 2021, as well as the mild facelift W206, which also gives you a mild hybrid system? I've got the collection of problem areas, the typical things to watch out for, pitfalls. Even though this Mercedes-Benz is considered a relatively reliable modern-day Benz, they do come with problems, many expensive problems. And maintenance is one aspect, but there are unfortunately some unexpected failures just waiting to happen. So stick around, let's get into the typical problem areas and get into this buyer's guide for the Mercedes W205. We in fact have owned ours for over 5 years now too, and I can literally put together a collection of some of the common issues, many of which we've personally experienced. One of them, of course, let's get right into it, is ABS sensors. All of a sudden you get an ABS fault or a code. That could be related to the ABS sensors, which do tend to get gummed up. It's something to be aware of, and you may have to actually, in fact, change it. It does mean you have to get in behind that front wheel, but it's not a huge repair. It can get slightly costly, but something to be aware of. Another common issue with these cars, and we're personally experiencing this right now, is these rear tail lights. While they look beautiful, there's two different style of tail lights. You get them on the sedan, which is a smaller bean shape, and you get the coupe like this one. Now, if you look, water ingress. Somewhere, this seam right here, we notice, seems to be where it pukes out water, but also water gets in. It's sloped at the right angle, so water always runs down it, and this seems to be compromised. The other side is fine, but this side here is full of water, and this is not uncommon. Water ingress into tail lights is a common issue for some of these vehicles, and in many cases, because of the LED nature of the front of the headlights and the front of the vehicles, a lot of these, of course, get either fogging or water ingress in the front. The worst part is these headlights are very expensive. You can expect to pay $4,000 to $5,000 for a new headlight, and there's a multitude of different modules because they have dynamic lighting, they have all kinds of LEDs and drivers inside of them. When you have a fault in a code, and it does happen, as we've had many of them, because of some faulty modules, these are very expensive to replace. These headlights, not cheap, and definitely make sure that all of those lights are working if you're shopping for a used C-Class. Another common problem with the W205 is the sunroof right here. As you'll see, the sunroof is opening. There's not uncommon to have people with issues of it not opening, squeaks, rattles, cables, pulleys, and even these slides can be problematic. Many people have complained about potential leaks as well. Now, knocking on wood, ours seems to work fine. You also get lots of bugs in this area. This is the wind deflector, and look at all of that. Make sure you clean that out more regularly and clean out all the debris in here. But actually having sunroofs that come off the rails, fault, fail, and cause expensive repairs to the tune of $1,500 to $4,000 means many owners actually prefer not to have the panoramic sunroof just because the potential for expensive repairs. Another common problem for some vehicles that are equipped, ours does not have it, but some can get the Airmatic suspension system. I actually know somebody personally who has a Mercedes-Benz that after about 6 or 7 hours on the driveway, the car is slumped right to the ground. We also had similar issues with our BMW X5 diesel. It also had an air ride suspension. So the Airmatic is essentially that, air ride. It allows the ride to feel much smoother, more plush, it self-levels, and it creates a much better driving experience. However, they do fail because a lot of those you get bags, you essentially get the air system, there's compressors, there's lines, there's the bags on each corner, and if you find yourself coming out in the morning and the vehicle is sitting down on its rump, that's a good possibility that you've dealt with a failed corner. You've got a potential problem with the Airmatic system, and that's going to be expensive. Expect at least $2,000, $3,000 per corner if you have that problem. Now, there are aftermarket options. Just like with our X5, I found some aftermarket bags online. I did the repair myself, and eventually I just got tired of it because I did it twice and I ended up just retrofitting to coil springs in the back anyhow. That being said, the Airmatic suspension system, while they're wonderful when they're new and when you have warranty, when they fail, they are very expensive. Before we get to the interior and as well a pile of problems under the hood, we'll talk about the transfer case. Of course, the transfer case on all-wheel drive systems are another point of failure. Our car here as well seems to have a little bit of a rolling noise. It's never seemed to be going away, and you know, we've taken the car to the dealer on a few occasions and they basically said there's nothing we can find. Yet on the other hand, we hear these strange noises. Everywhere I've searched online, everybody says that it's not uncommon for the half shafts to be a problem or the transfer case to be a problem. So to have an expensive repair for your transfer case in the all-wheel drive system can mean $5,000, $8,000 to repair. The benefit of having the all-wheel drive system in the 4Matics with the transfer case is obvious. For winter driving, poor weather conditions, and it does a great job of keeping the vehicle more stable at speed. But the reality is the drawback with the 4Matic is a potential failure in the transfer case. It's not cheap, it can fail. It's not a common fail issue, but it's something to be aware of. Just make sure that it drives properly, go full lock either way, turn the vehicle, crank it all the way to the left, do a full turn, listen for strange sounds, then do it, crank it all the way to the right, full turn, crank, drive around in a big open parking lot and check for strange sounds. If you're hearing clunking, squeaking, screeching, and strange noises, definitely want to investigate that further, because that, amongst many other issues, some of which we'll talk here in a second, you want to check on specifically in a pre-purchase inspection if you're looking at a used Mercedes W205. Now, for some models that you'll find in certain markets with the diesel engine, this one's gas, so we don't have this particular issue, but for diesel drivers and owners of the W205 in certain markets, there are a few common issues. For example, you want to be aware of the NOx sensors, a common issue that you're going to find under the hood. SCR modules and failures, AdBlue issues. That's the liquid that you add in there because you have to put the diesel exhaust fluid in there. Of course, the DEF heater, which they can freeze, crack, split, and that costs you thousands of dollars. We had that on our old BMW X5. Can't forget about those tank problems, and any one of these issues, depending on the severity, can range from $800, $900, up to $2,000 each. It's not a cheap system to maintain. And that's what I've said for many years. The old diesel engines were amazing. Our old X5 35D was amazing too, until it wasn't. Until we started seeing plugging off, started seeing the tank heater issues and a lot of other problems because directly related to the emission systems on modern day diesel engines. So if you're driving one of these or you're considering one, make sure you give it a good run through and have a good inspection done, because all of these emission programs on any of these modern day diesel engines are very expensive to fix, and most countries will not allow you to do a defeat or a bypass. I know here where I live, many people do full deletes, but in many places you can't. And especially in many of those countries that have the diesel engines, those are definitely ones that are going to be stricter on the emission systems. You won't have the option to delete. You're just going to have to continually pour money down expensive systems to keep that diesel engine on the road. Now, the automatic transmission found in these particular cars, called the 9G-tronic, and especially in the earlier generations, are known for harsh shifts, late abrupt shifting, maybe disengagement, or possibly not engaging at all, limp mode. Those are all factors. Just poor drivability with the transmission in any way could represent a problem. The valve body issue. And when you have that problem, you're dealing with $2,000 to $4,000 worth of expenses. Never cheap, never going to be an easy one to fix, and likely not a DIY job either. It's going to be something you're going to be sending down to the dealer for repair. And fortunately, the later models are a little better, but for the first couple of years with this generation, from the 2015, 16, and 17 model years, those are particularly susceptible to some of these problems. Later 9G-tronics were great. They're reliable. Ours, knocking on wood again, seem to be holding up fairly well. It shifts well. It does exactly as you ask. No hiccups, no muss, no fuss. Just know that it's a Benz. If an automatic transmission or any of the major components go, transmission, engine, or major electrical failures, you're in for a world of hurt. Another common issue, and it doesn't seem to affect every single W205, but it definitely affects ours, is the quality of the fit and finish, the plastics, squeaks, rattles, and failures of some of the plastics. Close that. This extender right here was your seatbelt extender. This is flimsy. That can break, and it has been known to break. A lot of the buttons and knobs have been known to be a problem. For sure, we've got fit and finish issues, plastics, this is peeling on here. And most importantly, we hear squeaks, rattles, all of these parts that can just squeak and rattle, they feel like they're bolted solidly, but then you drive down the road and a lot of these parts start to squeak and rattle, and that never inspires confidence. As well, I want to point out that this right here, parts like this, sometimes they just break off, and there's this cheap little plastic clips. I had to actually put in a couple myself over the last few years. So a lot of these parts on all over, interior, exterior, aren't necessarily that well made or put together. As a matter of fact, we even have this trim that runs down here, and look, we have this bubbling, this corrosion happening here. I don't even know how that happens. There's no chips, there's nothing broken there. It's just starting to corrode from the inside out. You're going to have some fit and finish issues, some quality problems, and honestly, some of the plastics aren't necessarily the most inspiring. Just something to be aware of. Any car will deteriorate as they age, but squeaks, rattles in a modern day Mercedes-Benz should just not be part of the equation, but it is. And under the hood of many of these modern day C-Class cars features an M274 engine. In this case, it's a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder, produces about 240 horsepower and change, and that does come with a series of potential pitfalls. Earlier generations, 2015s to 2016s, wrist pin failures. That's right, that's what connects that pin between your piston as well as your connecting rod. That wrist pin can fail. You could get knocking, you could get catastrophic engine failure altogether, limp mode, and just the engine seizing entirely. If that fails, that's a very expensive engine job. If it left far enough or it gets bad enough, a catastrophic failure could take out your engine, or the best case scenario, the engine just stops, it's low revs, and maybe it's just something easy to fix. Either way, if it's just repairing the top end or the entire engine, it could vary in cost, anywhere from $5, $8, $10,000, $15,000, or possibly even more, depending on how much damage it can do. Now, that's earlier generations of the M274, and other issues that people have commented about is the last cylinder, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a longitudinal engine, so it runs front to back. On the C-Class, on the cars like the CLA and GLA, it runs transversely mounted side to side because it's attached as a front-wheel drive platform. This is rear-wheel drive platform. Again, you've got front to back, and sometimes the back cylinder or certain cylinders were known to pop a hole. Sometimes there was conversation whether it was related to bad fueling or situations with detonation could contribute to popping a hole in the piston. And again, another expensive engine job, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 and possibly more. So something to be aware of. That whole piston issue was certainly something more prominent in the earlier models. Get into something that's a little bit newer, 18, 19, 20, 21, and you're generally going to be out of the woods for that type of failure. Another problem on some of the earlier M274 engines, but not all of them were afflicted. On the front of the engine, down in this area here, you could have timing chain stretch or catastrophic failure. What it could mean is a cold start. You go to start the car in the morning and all of a sudden, grrr, you hear a weird noise, and it's very mechanical sounding, sound like some chains in a garbage can. And sometimes that stretch can cause problems. If it fails outright, the engine just won't run. If it possibly skips a cog, now you have catastrophic engine failure. Best case, you might have some timing code related problems, or in fact just the noise that comes and goes. That's something that you might want to address sooner than later. That could cost you anywhere from $1,500 to about $3,000 to rectify. Not all M274 engines have that, and not all early M274 engines have that, but some of them do. And the ones that do, pay attention to that. On a cold start, you're going to want to do a cold start on these cars. If you're driving one of these, if one of these cars is of interest and you're considering buying an earlier generation M205 version of the C300 or any of the C-Class cars, definitely want to do a cold start. Watch for smoke at the back, which you probably won't see because of all the catalytic converters and all the other filtration, but watch for smoke, listen for strange noises, and the timing chain is one of those noises. Another problem, which I know many BMWs had it. I had it in my BMW N54 engine. That was in my 335, and unfortunately a lot of these manufacturers are utilizing electric water pumps and thermostats. A lot of it's plastic housing, a lot of it's poorly made in my own personal take, and if it fails, it's a water pump. That's what circulates the coolant through the engine to cool the turbo, to cool the engine, and to even provide heat in the cabin for those chilly days. But when the water pump stops working, what you're going to find is that temperature rising to a point on your temperature gauge that you've never seen before. All of a sudden it starts getting higher and higher and higher. That could be an indication your water pump is failing. You could also get codes or unfortunately, if you let it go far enough, you'll destroy your engine. If you warp an all aluminum engine like an M274, you'll destroy it easily. Not only that, this is your coolant reservoir. Always be checking that. Do your maintenance on your cooling system. Always check the level, and of course, always use the right products. That way you resist the urge to create other problems for your water pump and thermostat. Some of the worst things that people do are mixing colors or mixing types of coolant, and then that unfortunately creates problems. Either too much base or too much acid in the cooling system, and then next thing you know, you take out a cooling system impeller like a water pump or a thermostat, they start to fail, and it leads to these problems. That in fact could be an issue, common problem, well known. Watch out for cooling issues, and certainly if you have any mixing, if you're starting to see oil in here or you're starting to see coolant in your oil, that could be a meaning that you may actually have mixing. Possibly that could be a problem for a variety of reasons, one of which if maybe the engine's been overheated and the head gasket has been compromised. If that's the case, then run away from that. That could be a very expensive repair and something you definitely want to be aware of. So maintaining your cooling system and the water pump thermostat are two common areas that are well known in these cars. Another slightly less problematic issue that you don't see that often are high pressure fuel system. You can get fuel in the oil and you get the oil and fuel dilution problems. You can overcome the compression rings and unfortunately put all that fuel down into the oil. That can be a big issue if you smell too much gas in the oil when you're doing an oil change, whether you're pulling this off or checking your dipstick. If you're smelling raw gas, that could be a bit of a problem. It could mean poor performance, poor running, stalling, and any related issue. If you have bad fueling or a problem with the fuel system, the car may not run at all or run very poorly. If it stumbles, humbles, fails, stalls, definitely something you want to investigate, and a pre-purchase inspection should also be able to flush out some of those problems, pardon the pun. Now another issue I had was the PCV, the positive crankcase ventilation valve, which unfortunately is part of the circulation, gets the emissions, get the extra vapors out, and it relieves the pressure in the crankcase. The problem is they're well known to fail. The bigger problem is a lot of the contributing factors are lacking the proper amount of oil changes and direct fuel injection. Both contribute to contaminating the PCV. The worst part is even Mercedes-Benz has recognized allegedly that there was some chronic issue. And if you happen to have a longitudinal engine like a C300 like this and you have a problem with your PCV, head right to the dealer right away, because there has been an extended warranty on that product. It runs down here, you see the hoses down here, and it goes up and around, and it goes all the way around. It's a very convoluted system, and you don't want to take on that type of repair yourself because it's very expensive and very time consuming. In my car, they actually had to remove an engine mount, lift it up, and part of this routing of this PCV and the hoses. It's very complex. It's quite expensive to do it, mostly from a labor perspective, but knowing this full well, if you have a longitudinal engine like the M274 in the C300 like this, then you're likely covered under that warranty. As far as I know, there was at least 10 years added to that warranty, so something you want to be aware of. If you happen to have one of the lower entry-level cars like a CLA and GLA that has an engine that goes transversely mounted, unfortunately, that's not going to be covered. As far as I know, the latest and the greatest was that particular setup wasn't covered under that extended warranty, even though it was a very similar setup. That wasn't protected and covered. So that's where the C-Class might have an upper hand over those entry-level cars. But that being said, very common issue. And if you had to do it yourself, it's going to cost you thousands of dollars. Watch out for those emission failures. Pull the codes if you have a check engine light. If it's related to that, I would follow that up with the dealer, because that could in fact save you a ton of money. If that PCV has failed, and they do fail, it's a very common issue. When I talked to the service advisor that time we had ours done, it's very common. He even openly admitted that there's a good chance I'll be back in again in a few years to probably do it again. Now, what I heard has happened is there may have been an updated and a revision that they may not replace the entire system. They may in fact just replace parts of it. So that might have been revised, that might have changed here recently. I've heard there have been updates to the change on that PCV, but nonetheless, it's something that's well known, common, and protected under an extended warranty. Now, let's be honest, this is such a freakish thing, and only I thought the folks at Range Rover had this down packed. But you can in fact see an oil migration into the ECU, camshaft magnets, the Hell sensor. Yeah, a strange Mercedes specific issue. Now again, I've seen things like this in other weird manufacturers too, but this is potential for major failure. And for such an odd failure, it can add to a significant amount of cost. ECU damage being one of the problems, as well as the sensor itself may only cost, you know, $200, $300, $400. The downside is if the ECU and the oil migrates into the ECU, now all of a sudden you could see more of a $2,000 to $3,000 to $4,000 repair to upgrade the ECU. Yes, oil gets through the sensor, through the wiring harness, and actually winds up down in the ECU. An absolute terrible failure, such a weird, freakish kind of a problem, but any of these potential wiring harnesses are a migration point. As a matter of fact, in our experience was we had a local dealer actually spray under the hood after a sloppy oil service on a Saturday morning. They decided to wash under the hood. Well, lo and behold, right after that was done, high pressure water underneath there, just for the sake of trying to eliminate all that oil sludge that they left behind, what they started to do was force water. And when you look at wiring harnesses like this, sure, while everything's somewhat sealed, look at this, you get the backs are wide open and very much an open door for problem. Migration of oil, dirt, water, anything. Some of these connectors are sealed better than others, but you also have a fuse box that's buried under here. So if you're using high pressure water under the hood with all of these sensors, open wiring, ECUs, fuse boxes, and all of other parts, there's a high likeliness of seeing some issue, whether it's because of water and the high pressure or whether it's oil migration into ECU. There seems to be a little bit of an issue with some of these problems happening. It's not common, but it's freakish. And when it happens, everybody that I know says, why me? Just my luck, right? So with all of that said, a lot of these cars are actually quite reliable. Mercedes-Benz is a complex luxury brand, and the E-Class, the S-Class are really the top tier. But unfortunately, there are problems. I want to share that with you. There's hundreds of thousands of these cars on the road. Many of them are still going after hundreds of thousands of miles. They clearly have longevity built in, but there are some repairs needed from time to time, some very expensive repairs. With all of that said, please do drop a line. Don't forget to binge watch these videos. That's really going to help the algorithm and help the channel ECPP, and we'll definitely be delivering some greatest new videos for you upcoming soon. Hope to see each and every one of you real soon, everybody. Catch you then. Bye-bye.